Princess Margaret made a flight of 5,370 miles from Great Britain to Mombasa for the start of her East African tour. A sleek-lined herald of royal occasion, the yacht Britannia sailed into Mombasa to await the princess's arrival. And for Kenya's principal port, a memorable day began at the airport as the princess arrived in the BOAC Argonaut Ajax. The governor of Kenya, Sir Evelyn Baring, led the official welcome to the first royal visitor for some 20 years. Then the governor presented civic dignitaries and local chiefs who pledged the welcome of their peoples. And there was a gracious thank you to the BOAC crew for the safe 29-hour flight from Britain. Next morning, the princess attended divine service at Mombasa Cathedral. She was met by the provost, the Very Reverend R.B. Jupp, who later presented a white prayer book. During the service, the governor read the lesson, and there was a royal signature for the Distinguished Visitors Book. At the Diamond Jubilee Hall, the royal visitor attended a reception given by the Mombasa Indian, Arab and African Ladies Association. A dance led by Bapsi Mehta, a Parsi girl, was based on an Indian legend which tells the story of a young girl who sees a princess and garlands her with a golden chain. When the princess left, smiling happily, she was still wearing her garland of gold. So to the municipal stadium, where 19,000 children of many races and creeds, for Mombasa is a miniature commonwealth in itself, welcomed their princess with flags and cheers. A happy memory to carry on that 6-day voyage to Mauritius. Mauritius. Into Port Louis, under the blazing skies of the Indian Ocean, the Royal Yacht Britannia was escorted by a flotilla of small craft, an island welcome for Princess Margaret. And what a welcome! The enthusiastic crowds had to be held back as the royal visitor came ashore to be greeted by the governor, Sir Robert Scott. The Guard of Honor was mounted by the 6th Tanganyika Battalion, King's African Rifles. During a visit to Kassi, a suburb, large crowds mobbed the closed car, all eager to catch a glimpse of the royal visitor. Her Royal Highness had come to lay the foundation stone of the Royal College School, now under construction. During the afternoon, the princess joined the happy islanders at sport when she drove down the Champ de Mars racecourse, this time in an open car. And still, the enthusiasm of the crowd broke all bounds. Acknowledging the boisterous, affectionate tribute from the royal box, the princess watched a race specially staged in her honor, the Princess Margaret Stakes. The winner was No Name, and the Gold Cup presentation to Mrs. Robert Noel, the owner, rounded off an unforgettable day for Mauritius. On the second day of her stay, Princess Margaret attended morning service at St. Paul's Church, Vacoas. There she was received by the Bishop of Mauritius, who spoke of his congregation as belonging to the great British family, though speaking many languages. Touring the northern part of the island, it was hail and farewell for hundreds of schoolchildren assembled at the Pamplemousse Botanical Gardens. A flying visit, but the memory of a lifetime, and a permanent souvenir, the planting of a tropical tree known as Queen Flower. During a visit to a cane-crushing factory, the biggest and most modern in Mauritius, Her Royal Highness walked along the narrow catwalks high above the giant machinery that crushes 250 tons of cane every hour. The mill produces 1/10 of the island's total production of sugar. Royal interest too in the social progress of the island with the opening of a new wing at the orthopedic hospital. The visit proved a real tonic for a crippled Creole youngster who presented the royal bouquet. Not forgotten was the children's ward, where the presence of a real princess brought much happiness to young sufferers. Already on the tour, Princess Margaret had won all hearts, and in no small measure strengthened the bonds between Commonwealth peoples and the Crown. Zanzibar. The royal yacht has arrived. That excited message, repeated in many tongues, brought the loyal people of Zanzibar flocking to the quayside, while a salvo of guns roared a welcome to the Island of Cloves. And once again, an island people sailed forth to meet their royal guest, a flotilla of Arab dhows that danced attendance on Britannia, and then dipped in salute as the royal barge, with Princess Margaret on board, sailed past to the pier. The acting British resident, Mr. Robert Alford, led the official welcome of the romantic island of legend and story. Meanwhile, as Zanzibar's own music of greeting echoed through the streets, the Sultan, with the Sultana, waited at his white-walled palace to welcome Princess Margaret. And while the Sultan entertained his guest, his subjects performed traditional sword dances in the street below, a dance symbolizing loyalty and welcome. During this meeting, the Sultan conferred the Order of the Brilliant Star of Zanzibar upon Princess Margaret, the first woman to receive the award. This first day brought a spectacular social occasion, a garden party held in the grounds of the residency. For many of the 600 guests, the occasion brought a link with home and royal recognition for loyal Commonwealth service. During her 3-day stay, the princess drove out to the coconut country. At one plantation, she watched the agile collecting of the nuts from trees 60 feet high. But Zanzibar's prosperity depends primarily on the clove industry, and Her Royal Highness watched the grading of the spice, which is used not only for flavoring puddings and pies, but also in medicine. After attending morning service at Christ Church Cathedral, the royal visitor met and received gifts from 2 aged African women who were rescued from slave traders by British patrols at the turn of the century. In their youth, the 2 women had known the great H.M. Stanley, whose best remembered achievement was his successful search for the lost missionary, David Livingstone. All too soon, 3 memorable days were over. Regretfully, the islanders watched the royal barge sail out towards the Britannia. Princess Margaret had set sail for Tanganyika, but the memory of her visit will indeed remain a fragrant one on the Island of Cloves. Tanganyika. When the Britannia berthed at the new deepwater docks at Dar es Salaam, Princess Margaret, who was welcomed by the governor, Sir Edward Twining, had an early introduction to Tanganyika's economic development. So, on this occasion, age-old greetings formed the background to African progress with the inauguration of the Princess Margaret Quay, which has cost £4 million. After the unveiling, the princess was handed a bouquet by 3 little girls representing the 3 groups of people present: European, Asian, and African. Next day, the true spirit of Tanganyika was reflected in the Baratza, or tribal gathering. There, dignified chieftains pledged the allegiance of their followers. Over 100 tribes were represented, all combining in a massed African salute to the royal visitor. From Dar es Salaam, the princess flew to Tanga, where the first visit was to the General Hospital. Showing her great interest in child welfare, the princess spent some time looking at tiny African babies lying in their cribs, while there was gracious recognition for trainee nurses who dedicated their lives to the relief of the sick and suffering. Tanga's growing importance is centered around the sisal industry. From here, 1/6 of the world's sisal crop is exported, valued at £10 million. But on this day, industry was forgotten as vast crowds lined the processional route to cheer a royal visitor who will be long remembered in Tanganyika. Bright African sunshine greeted the princess when she arrived at Mbeya, continuing her 5 weeks tour of these outposts of the British Commonwealth. At this remote settlement, 6,000 feet above sea level, there came the homage of loyal chieftains who had travelled many arduous miles for the occasion. Not least was the welcome from Chief Mwani Teresa Ntari, who rules 10,000 tribesmen, more than any other chieftain in Tanganyika. At Tabora, which was a notorious slave trading center in the bad old days of the past, the princess drove around in the midst of a ceremonial dance of greeting. Wagogo warriors, their bodies daubed with red and white clay, staged a mock battle in her honor, and something like 40,000 tribesmen greeted the princess from far-off Britain. At Mwanza, the homage of loyal African peoples continued when Princess Margaret looked at a fascinating array of gifts presented by proud chieftains on behalf of their tribes. This was the generous welcome to a baratza that brought to the royal guest a glimpse of Africa's primitive past. Among a revival of half-forgotten tribal dances was a parade of snake doctors carrying 18-foot pythons, cobras, or the deadly green mambas. There were the Bungunguli, a tribe of porcupine hunters. They now keep them as domestic pets with baboons and hyenas. Royal appreciation marked a colorful pageant of tribal history. After the baratza, a flight to the Williamson's diamond mines at Mwadui in the desert. Here, a flourishing industry owes its existence to a lone prospector who persevered, Dr. Williamson. Next day, Her Royal Highness drove to Arusha to attend a gathering of nomadic Maasai. Among those presented were officials who work for the benefit of African peoples. During her stay in this region, the princess visited the farm of Mr. Künstler, a big game hunter. There she fed the giraffes and selected a pair of zebras, a present from the government of Tanganyika. One of the last royal engagements in Tanganyika was a visit to an agricultural show at Moshi, beneath the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro. There, the princess planted a tree as a memento of her visit. Later, during a tour of the center, she enjoyed a cup of Tanganyika coffee served in a cardboard container. Kenya. After a rough flight from Tanganyika, the princess arrived at Nairobi on the final stage of her East African tour. And what a welcome there was to this flourishing capital of Kenya from the large gathering of British settlers and loyal Africans who had been further heartened by the capture of a leading Mau Mau terrorist, Dedan Kimathi. An early visit was made to the workshops of the East African railways with their blast furnaces and huge cranes that carry loads up to nearly 40 tons. A locomotive newly arrived from Britain was one of the objects of special attention. The country's great farming interests were not forgotten. Magnificent cattle from neighboring farms were on parade at the Kenya Royal Agricultural Show. Though one of the exhibits had left his party manners at home. At the end of the show, the princess presented the awards to winning owners. There was royal encouragement, too, for another industry of growing importance, with a visit to the exhibit of the East African tobacco growers. The The following day brought a full round of engagements, and in the sports stadium at Nairobi, the homage of thousands of children. Royal acknowledgement of sporting activities came with the presentation of 27 members of the colony's Olympic team who received a shield from the Princess. And then the flag, which has proudly taken its place in the Grand Parade at Melbourne. At the Kaloleni estate, a visit to the children's nursery, where a good time was obviously had by all. At an evening reception held in her honor at Government House, the Princess, in a shimmering gown of oyster tulle and gold lace, was joined by the Governor of Kenya, Sir Evelyn Baring, and Lady Baring. Yet another pageant of African progress welcomed Princess Margaret to Machakos, where she visited the Kamba tribe, renowned for its courage and hospitality. There were flowers, too, a fragrant offering in this hot and dusty upland country. Besides the traditional dances of welcome, the pageant portrayed the evolution of the loyal Kamba from brave warriors into peaceful farmers with British encouragement and help. Now they gave an enthusiastic farewell to their royal visitor when she left Machakos. Before leaving Nairobi, the Princess performed the opening ceremony at the Royal Technical College of East Africa. The ultimate aim of the college is to accommodate no fewer than 2,500 students. And here will be trained the future leaders in the development of East Africa for the good of her peoples. The final day of this strenuous 5 weeks tour was spent at Kisumu. There, in a drive from the airport, the Princess was acclaimed by huge crowds. At the sports ground, local schoolchildren brought a happy note to a day of partying as their cheers echoed around the arena. Then on to the stadium for a display of ritual dancing given by Watende, Kipsigis and Luo tribesmen. More than 15,000 of these men had served the government with distinction during the Mau Mau emergency. Then, after final goodbyes at Kisumu Airport, the Princess took leave of East Africa as she left in a Heron aircraft. A final farewell sent the Princess home with memories of her East African journeys and of the progress of loyal peoples towards a richer, fuller life.